Hello, my name is Count Lovenstein and I am going to talk a little bit about software piracy. So nowadays there's not really much art to it. Say for example, I'm an audio engineer, which I am, and I don't want to have to pay hundreds of pounds for Pro Tools. So Google Pro Tools cracked torrent, and there you have a magnet link, so you get a copy of that, and load transmission, which is a torrent reactor for Linux, and all you have to do is open URL, there's your magnet link, and it'll start finding peers, and then you just let it download and follow the instructions. Now I'm not actually going to do it because I'm retired from piracy long since, and I don't even particularly like Pro Tools. Now, in the old days, things were a little bit different. There was no World Wide Web. There was BBS boards, which they could host floppy disks, which you could download very, very slowly. A lot of the time, back in like 1989, 90, it was easier just to send the discs around by Royal Mail. There were no deals for internet time, so anytime you spent phoning BBS sites, you were charged as if you were on the phone talking, which back in those days I think cost you about 10p a minute or something like that. And nowadays an 880k floppy disk would download in 1 second. Back then it took rather longer than that. Even when you were looking at the BBS sites, it was so slow you could actually see the text coming in. I've got an Amiga emulator here, just to demonstrate a couple of things. So I am going to go back, games, loading a game within this Cdra, and reset. That's your old Amiga original chipset, DOS. The Amiga operating system was actually kinda Unix influenced, so it was like Linux, it was all forward slashes and the directory structures, and instead the backwards ones like Windows and Microsoft. So here's your crack draw. We are supplied by ads of inner city. actually remember him back in the day, when I was very young. He was a big player in the scene. He seemed to have absolutely no fear of the law whatsoever. Cdra, this is kind of where the demo scene came from. People that crack these things would go out of their way to make these wee Cdras up and outdo each other. And some people like myself actually ended up being more interested in collecting these Cdras and putting them on discs than I was in actually playing the pirated games. Right, so enough of that. Let's move that to DF1. And I'm going to put black-riot command disk ADF and DF nothing and reset it. So this black-riot, this is what my friend and I used to call ourselves, because quite obviously you couldn't be using your real name. We did, of course, get caught in the end, and he had all his stuff confiscated by the police. Yeah, so disk X. Now what I want this for, so we're gonna look through DF1 and show this as hex and search for any ASCII text from block 0. So what I'm doing here basically is just looking for any messages that have been left on the disk. Nothing terribly useful to me there. Don't know why there's an awful 2 thing there, unless this game was ported from an awful 2 maybe. Anyway, let's keep going. So that's the text that was side scrolling in the Cdra. Now that, bingo. So there you have a phone number, and it's an England phone number. So what I would have done with that back in the old days is phoned that number, then very politely asked whoever answered the phone if there was somebody there with an Amiga 500 or any kind of Amiga for that matter, who might be interested in trading or whatever. So this message says if you want a tune then ring England. So yeah, this guy's the musician who created the music for the Cdra by the looks of things. Now that does not mean that he wouldn't be a good guy to know. All contacts were valuable. We managed to make quite a few friends up and down the length of Britain using these kind of methods, and as you can see, I did not do anything particularly clever. This is something that anyone could do if they were minded to it. Yeah, we're back into gibberish. Error messages. So back in those days, if you were to buy an original game, it's going to cost you at the beginning of the 1990s 25 quid. So if I come out of here for a second, I should be able to find out inflation calculator UK. So in 1990, £25 in 1990. So you're talking about 60 quid in today's money. Now that, bear in mind, we're talking with us, we were all still school kids at this time, and 58 quid for a video game was a little bit hard for most of us to come by. I mean, even with Paul and black-riot too, he was a guy who had everything, and even he couldn't really afford to be throwing 58 quid at computer games. So what you did was you found sources of cracked games instead, and once you had them cracked games, it was a really simple matter. Going back to the good old Amiga here, whoops, and quit, go on, quit. Okay. I'll just reset you instead. So eject. I want copy. Utilities. black-riot. Disk copiers. Let's see. Once the copy protection was bypassed by the crackers, then copying the disks was really simple. I mean, the most computer illiterate person on earth could do it. So there's X copy there. And you would simply put a blank disk in DF1, and the game you wanted to copy in DF nothing. Or if you didn't have an external drive, you could let's see if I can remember how to use this. DOS copy plus. So target drives, you take that away, so there's no target drive. It should now, if I start this, copy it to RAM. So go. Not enough memory for RAM copy. The later versions of Xcopy would actually have done that with no trouble. What they did was they just copied half the disk till the RAM ran out, then they would copy the RAM to the new disk, then they would copy the second half of the disk into RAM and copy that to the new disk. So really easy. No, it certainly wasn't Robin Hood type of thing for everyone involved in it, especially not when you looked at the way the people treated each other. Some of it got quite nasty. I remember people grassing each other up to the Federation Against Software Theft and all sorts, just because they'd had stupid fucking teenage arguments. I'm sure there's some of the people that were in the scene then that probably still hate each other to this day. So that was the Amiga, and after the Amiga was huge in 1990, like everyone had them. It was the go-to computer. There was one guy out of basically everyone I knew who had an Atari ST, and to be fair, he actually had some really cool stuff for it for the time. We had like wee Genlock things that you could scan photos with, and you had you could import short videos from an old kind of JVC camera, and now it was nothing like what you can do today. Obviously, you'd you could import like someone waving for a few seconds or someone doing something, but after the first few seconds it ran out of memory, and hard disks back then were extortionate. Nobody had them. You need to be absolutely loaded. I think like a 10 meg hard disk back then would cost you about £1,000 or something like that. So that really not easy to come by at all. After like 1993, so 1993 was kind of the Amiga's last big year. The Amiga 1200 had been released, but Jack Tramiel was long gone from Commodore by this point, and the old kind of ethos, like the Commodore 64 was the best home computer of its day. Then the Amiga was the best home computer of its day. Then the 500, the 1000 as well. Like all of them, they were really shit hot. But then when it got to the 1200, they released this ridiculously underpowered computer. It had 2 meg of RAM. It had no hard disk. It had AIGA graphics, which I think were alright for the day. I don't think the PC graphics were up to much in 1993 either. Not compared to what came in the following years. The sound card was... I don't recall the sound card in the 1200 being any better than the... well, I should say sound chip. It wasn't a card in the Amiga in those days. But the sound chip in the Amiga 1200 was an 8-bit thing. I don't recall it being any better than, what was in the 500. And basically, the generation of PCs that come out in the mid-90s just absolutely blew this thing away. You had the CD32 as well, but it was completely blown away by like the Sony PlayStation. There was no big jump like there had been with previous Commodore computers. So after that, the piracy that me and my friends were doing moved on to the PlayStation 1. It had copy protection that worked by having write operations and official Sony CD writers that would put blocks at the beginning with a certain checksum that wouldn't be replicated with the CD writers you had in your computer at home. Now, you could get around this by getting a real genuine PlayStation disc, like the one that shipped with the PlayStation when you bought it. You'd always get your free game because no one's going to buy a PlayStation with nothing to put in it. I think it was Ridge Racer we got with it. You could put Ridge Racer in, wait for the welcome screen to come up, take that out and then put your copied disc in, and then it would load. However, no one wanted to do that, so what you did was you bought these little mod chips here, mod chip 12C508P, and by this time you had the kind of World Wide Web 1.0, and it was really easy to go on that and find these wiring diagrams that showed you how to wire the chip up. PlayStation 1 mod chip, my own diagram. So there you go, it showed you, you could find out all the points you had to solder onto, and if you had someone who was decent with a soldering iron, it was literally a 10-minute job. Then you could just copy all the original games with a CD writer, and the PlayStations would play them. And that is more or less the point when I retired from piracy. By the time I started working, I did actually, I don't want to tell lies here. When I first left university, after being unceremoniously booted out with no qualifications at the end of year one, because I spent the entire 12 months in the student union bar drinking, I took a job in a hotel where we were paid fucking pennies even by the standards of back then. So I did actually have a pirated copy of Adobe Photoshop, and much the same way, you would download it from a dodgy site. You would run the installer. You would get your wee Cdra coming up, cracked by Zone or whatever, and they back then didn't really. You wouldn't really have to worry about, you know, the Photoshop phoning home and telling anyone it wasn't genuine. That did come later on. If you're using cracked stuff now, I think you've got to kind of keep it behind firewalls and all that. But after that, the open source movement was starting to become bigger, and there were a lot more options for people who didn't necessarily want to continue in a life of petty crime, but also didn't want to be abused by manufacturers of proprietary software. So now, for example, I've got Linux installed on this machine. Rather than Photoshop, I'll use GIMP, which can pretty much do anything that Linux can do. I did for a while actually do my audio work in Linux, but I moved back to Windows just for that, because I could not get the latency times down anywhere near as low as I could on my Windows computer. So Windows will run my USB Focusrite because it's compliant with certain standards. So Linux will pick it up, but it doesn't run it anywhere near as well as Windows does. With Windows I can get latency times down to about 100th of a second, which is good enough that no human being's ever going to notice it. In Linux the latency times are more like a 10th of a second, which is that's getting into the realms of where human beings will hear problems with it. Hopefully, as things improve, Linux does seem to be becoming more popular as Windows is becoming nastier. I know a lot of people object to some of the shenanigans that go on with Windows 11, so if more people keep turning to Linux, then audio hardware manufacturers may start supporting Linux, which would be cool. Anyway, back to the piracy. Look at the history of piracy, even like pre-digital piracy. You will always see when inequality is rife and things are overpriced and are kept out of the reach of people who are not allowed to share in the spoils of society, you will always get contraband and piracy. It's just human nature. A lot of people are just not going to be fucked with in that way. If the stuff's kept out of their reach and there's no way to, have attainment. You saw it in the golden age of piracy in the high seas. It was exactly the same thing. People who worked at sea were treated like dirt. They were paid pennies. They were kept in conditions that were worse than being in jail. So they ended up taking the law into their own hands and taking loot for themselves. All down the Scottish coast where I live, they had to set up a customs and excise branch to stop all the contraband that was coming in from all the kind of rocky inlets up and down the coast. Where this seemed to fall down was that a lot of the local landowners were quite happy for the smugglers to make their way through their land. Like the Duke of Portland, famously, in the area I live in, he let them do it, and because he would get a nice backhander, and he thought, why not? There's free stuff going, why not take it? All he had to do was just not catch them. So, in the digital age, personally I think it's exactly the same thing. If the games had been sold at a reasonable price and there'd been a simple way to make backups of them, I would have quite happily paid for them. When I had my Commodore 64 and my Commodore Plus 4, and you could buy Mastertronic games for £2 a shot, I never ever pirated them because there was no need to. But you could use an action replay cartridge to single file all the levels of a game. If you were really smart and talented, you could then write a loader for all the levels. If you weren't, you would have to load them all in manually, but you could get around copy protection that way. But that was a lot of trouble to go to. Far easier to just buy a cracked game and use Xcopy to spread it around. So there was a huge trade in cracked games. The barrel ones in Glasgow and Marketplace, there was so much shit going on in there that what was it? Was it New Computer Express, the magazine was called? Yeah, that's it, New Computer Express. They did an expose on the barrel ones where they sent journalists in to find out what was going on there. But you could literally just walk up to a stall where there'd be a couple of Amigas sitting, and you just told the guy what game you wanted, and he would copy it from thousands of discs that were. And nobody seemed to bat an eyelid, even though this has been done absolutely blatantly. So even now, as long as I can remember, there's been no serious attempts made to stop piracy. The only way you might ever get into trouble for it is if you are producing stuff en masse and selling it. You're not going at the moment to go to jail for using pirated stuff. You would really need to be, you need to be a supplier of it, and you would need to be supplying lots of it. Anyway, oh, come on.